In April 1986, a star fell from the sky. At least that's how the people of Chernobyl came to understand what happened. The third angel of the book of Revelation sounded his trumpet, waters turned bitter, and many died. But this wasn't biblical prophecy. This was the worst nuclear disaster in human history. And here's what most people don't know. Chernobyl never became a ghost town. Today, thousands of people still live and work there, navigating an invisible threat that will outlast civilizations. Before we talk about the disaster, we need to understand what Chernobyl was. This wasn't some remote outpost. The city had existed since 1193, beginning as a hunting pavilion with a rich religious history spanning centuries. By the 1970s, the Soviet Union was investing heavily in nuclear power, and Chernobyl became home to the Lenin nuclear power plant. Just 3 kilometers away, they built Pripyat, a model Soviet city with apartment blocks, playgrounds, and public monuments designed specifically to house the plant workers and their families. 14,000 people lived in Chernobyl. 50,000 lived in Pripyat. These weren't just numbers. These were communities, families, lives built around the promise of Soviet nuclear ambition. The plant used RBMK reactors. 4 of them were operational by 1986. To understand what went wrong, you need to understand how nuclear reactors work. At their core, they contain and control chain reactions through a process called fission. A neutron collides with a larger atom, forcing it to split into 2 smaller atoms, releasing tremendous energy and more neutrons. Those neutrons hit other atoms. Chain reaction. Uranium and plutonium are perfect for this because they're easy to start and control. The fuel is processed into small ceramic pellets, stacked in sealed metal tubes called fuel rods. Over 200 of these rods form a fuel assembly. A reactor core typically has hundreds of assemblies. Inside the reactor vessel, these fuel rods are immersed in water, which acts as both coolant and moderator, slowing down the neutrons to sustain the chain reaction. The heat turns water into steam, which spins turbines to generate electricity. No carbon emissions. Clean energy. That was the promise. On April 25, 1986, engineers at Reactor 4 began a routine test. They wanted to know if the reactor could still be cooled if the plant lost power. It was a reasonable question, but during the test, workers violated safety protocols. They disabled automatic shutdown mechanisms. The reactor became unstable. Power surged. Despite attempts to fully shut down the reactor, another power wave caused a chain reaction of explosions inside. At 1:24 a.m. on April 26th, the reactor core itself was exposed. The temperature inside reached 4,600 degrees Celsius. For context, the surface of the sun reaches 5,500. The explosion, equivalent to 66 tons of TNT, destroyed the roof of the 20-story reactor building, completely obliterated everything inside the core, and ejected at least 28 tons of highly radioactive debris into the immediate surroundings. A radioactive fire burned for almost 2 weeks, launching an enormous cloud of radioactive gases and aerosols into the atmosphere. The wind carried it north and west. Radioactive rain fell across Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, and eventually reached Scandinavia and Eastern Europe. The fallout included iodine-131, cesium-137, and plutonium-239. None of these occur naturally. All are extremely dangerous. Each has its own half-life, the time it takes for radioactivity to reduce by half. Iodine-131 accumulates rapidly in the thyroid gland, causing thyroid cancer. Its half-life is 8 days. Cesium-137 remains in soil and produces gamma rays thousands of times more energetic than sunlight. Its half-life is about 30 years. Plutonium-239, extremely radiotoxic when inhaled, has a half-life of 24,000 years. Let that sink in. 24,000 years. While the main pattern of radioactive fallout was established shortly after the accident, the particles remain in motion today, shifting with wind and flowing through water. 2 workers died instantly. Within weeks, 28 more would die from radiation poisoning. 237 people were diagnosed with radioactive iodine contamination, with 134 confirmed cases. But here's where the story gets complicated, because while thousands were being evacuated from homes they'd never returned to, thousands more were arriving. 36 hours after the explosion, evacuations began. 50,000 people left Pripyat, told they'd be gone for 3 days. They never came back. Over the following months and years, the Soviet government relocated 360,000 people from the surrounding areas. A 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established around Ground Zero. Pripyat remains a ghost city to Bartown. This day, its apartment buildings and playgrounds slowly being consumed by nature. But evacuations were only half the story. The Soviet Union launched an effort officially called the liquidation of the consequences of the Chernobyl accident. The workers were called liquidators. They had an impossible job. Radioactive particles are invisible, tasteless, and odorless. In the most intense areas, they contaminate everything from bricks to livestock to leaves on the ground. These particles cannot be destroyed. All the liquidators could do was bury them, or try to seal them somehow. Some worked around villages destroying crops, cutting down forests, even covering the topsoil itself. Around the nuclear plant, some jobs like lifting highly radioactive debris or pouring concrete to seal the reactor were so dangerous that men could absorb lethal doses of radiation in minutes. Estimates for the number of liquidators vary widely because there's no official record of everyone who participated, but the number is in the hundreds of thousands, probably over 500,000. They came from throughout the former Soviet Union. Most were young men, perhaps 10% are still alive today. And here's what makes this story so haunting. While the world saw Chernobyl as a place to abandon, some people saw it differently. Elena Buntova, a doctor of biology, came to study the effects of radiation on wildlife. She met Sergei Lapiha, who grew up near Chernobyl, at a cafe inside the exclusion zone. He worked as a photographer at the object shelter, the containment unit serving as a sarcophagus for the remains of Reactor 4. Over the years, he photographed the facilities, including a notorious object inside the reactor building called the Elephant's Foot. It's a dark, glassy slab of melted radioactive lava that flowed into a corridor after the meltdown before solidifying like a human-sized stalagmite. The slab is so radioactive that spending 5 minutes near it without protection would be a death sentence. Elena and Sergei got married. They've lived in Chernobyl for over 30 years. They're now over 60 and retired, and they have no plans to leave. When asked why, Sergei thinks for a minute before answering, "I'm simply happy in Chernobyl." Their small brick house is cozy inside. They occupied an abandoned home and renovated it over the years. There are plenty of houses to choose from. The city of Chernobyl used to have a population of 14,000. In the living room, they have plants near the window, some comfortable chairs, a TV, and a bright aquarium full of energetic fish. In the backyard, they keep beehives and care for 4 dogs, all rescued from within the exclusion zone. Balu, the youngest, was born from a wolf crossing. As Sergei grabs the huge dog's face and plays with him, saying, "Smart wolf, smart dog," he doesn't seem very worried. But here's the reality they live with. Children are prohibited in the zone. Elena and Sergei each had children before they met, but because anyone under 18 is more susceptible to ionizing radiation, their children could never enter the zone. Neither can their grandchildren. They accept this. It's the price of living in Chernobyl, and they're not alone. Today, about 7,000 people enter and exit the exclusion zone for work. More than 4,000 work shifts of 15 days per month or 4 days per week, schedules designed to minimize exposure to ionizing radiation. They're security guards, firefighters, scientists, or those who maintain the infrastructure of this unique community. Because Chernobyl isn't their permanent residence, they occupy some of the rooms and apartments that were evacuated in 1986. At dusk, the city's pace is quite calm. Some people read or watch movies. On hot days, they might break radiation safety rules and take a dip in the river. The remaining workers arrive by train every day to perform duties at the nuclear plant. Although it no longer produces electricity, the decommissioning of the 3 remaining reactors will take at least until 2065. There's an entire division within the Institute for Safety Problems of Nuclear Power Plants dedicated to containing Reactor 4. In 2016, the plant received a new containment unit that looks like a Quonset hut and should last 100 years, though the materials inside will remain radioactive for millennia. Some elderly residents defied evacuation orders and returned to their villages as quickly as possible. Those who ignored the evacuation order and came back are now about 70 or 80 years old. Many have died in the past 5 years. Those who remain depend on food they grow and the surrounding forest, including large, abundant mushrooms that are particularly good at absorbing cesium-137, which emits beta and gamma radiation. Some residents roast these mushrooms indoors in wood-burning stoves. The trees that burn as fuel can also be radioactive, so the smoke causes new, small precipitation nearby. Radiation is a constant companion here. In inhabited places, levels are generally low. In others, they're dangerously high. But without a dosimeter or Geiger counter, which many people don't have and sometimes don't even care to have, measurement is impossible. Every year on the night of April 25th, people gather around an angel fixed atop a stone pedestal in the city of Chernobyl. The angel's body is made entirely of steel, mostly rebar forming a sharp silhouette against the sky, and it holds a long trumpet to its lips. This sculpture represents the third angel of the Book of Revelation. At the foot of the angel's statue, there's a large concrete slab in the shape of the Ukrainian extension of the exclusion zone. During the memorial, it glows orange under the light of countless small lanterns. A long row of signs extends away from the angel along a tree-lined path. Each of the more than 100 signs bears the name of a Ukrainian village that was evacuated. The people gathered hold thin beeswax candles that drip onto the palms of their hands. They listen to songs and poems performed by some of the survivors, and the air becomes charged with emotion. Yuri Tatarchuk, former deputy head of the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone Information Department, calls it a combination of sadness and contentment. It's like Victory Day in any war. People cry and smile at the same time. Before the annual gathering around the Steel Angel, an evening mass is held on the night of April 25th at the local Orthodox church, maintained by Sergei Lepiha as volunteer work during his retirement. Its exterior walls are firm and white, with arches in bright blue and two golden domes on the roof. Compared to the abandoned buildings and rubble surrounding it, the church looks new. After Mass, participants leave and ring the memory bell, hung in its own arch in the corner of the cemetery. They give one toll for each year since the accident. This year it was 35 tolls. The exclusion zone is less radioactive than it once was, but Chernobyl has the ability to distort time. 35 years is a long time for a human life, and it's also significant for materials like cesium-137 and strontium-90, with half-lives of about 30 years. But it's almost nothing for radioactive materials that will take millennia to decompose. What good is a containment unit that lasts a century when it protects us from something with a half-life of 24,000 years? There are also new threats, like forest fires that burn radioactive trees and can create new risk zones. According to Bruno Carreron, laboratory director of the Independent Research and Information Commission on Radioactivity, humanity currently lacks the technical solutions or financial means to deal with a disaster like this. In short, although thousands of people still work at the site every day, the Chernobyl nuclear catastrophe is not manageable in any way. And yet, life continues. About 500 people still live in Chernobyl today, even after the disaster. Some, like Elena and Sergei, found something here they couldn't find elsewhere. Evgeny Valente, an IT specialist for 10 years, says the disaster never left his mind. I think about the people who were truly victimized in the liquidation process. In the Soviet Union, the method was to cover everything with human lives. The city has become a kind of living memorial, maintained by those who refuse to let it be forgotten, who understand that some catastrophes are too dangerous to abandon. Even here, so close to the epicenter of the worst nuclear plant disaster in history, there is a sense of community, even a feeling of being home. The people who remain aren't ignoring the danger. They're living with it, measuring it, respecting it, and somehow, impossibly, building lives within it.